My wedding day in Kansas was meant to be the happiest day of my life, and the one I had been dreaming of for a very long time. In the company of loved ones, it was supposed to be a happy celebration of love. Instead, though, it became a nightmare that devastated me and made me doubt all of my beliefs. The ceremony was lovely in its own right. The guests were all grinning, the flowers were beautifully arranged, and the music was playing quietly in the background. I felt a surge of eagerness and excitement as I glanced around the room. I was eager to begin our new life together, and Logan and I had spent months organizing every aspect. It was all so good until it wasn't. Things started to fall apart as the evening wore on. It began when Mrs. Owen, Logan's mother, came up to me. She was a severe woman in her late 50s who frequently intimidated others around her with her air of authority. She yelled my name with a serious look on her face. "Kendra," she murmured, her tone icy and disapproving. "I need to speak with you." I trailed behind her to a more tranquil section of the stadium, hoping it was a little issue that could be easily resolved. But the moment we were alone, her anger sprang up. Her face was red, and her voice was piercing. "You've been incredibly disrespectful today," she said at me with a frown, "and you've embarrassed me in front of everyone here." It surprised me. Being careful and polite had been my entire day. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying not to freak out even though my heart was racing. I didn't get a chance to explain myself. "Stop acting like you're innocent," she screamed. "After joining this family, you think you can achieve everything you set your mind to. You are a waste of time." She said something that was like a kick to the gut. It was incredible what I was listening to. Logan approached me while I was collecting my thoughts. The tension must have been palpable to him from across the room. He was staring at us both, his face unbreakable. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp and questioning. The way he asked, however, suggested that he had a suspect. Mrs. Owen said, "Kendra has been disrespectful, raising her voice to be heard. She's ruined the day for everyone." I was astounded by what was happening. Before I could respond, Logan turned harshly and disappointedly to face me. He questioned, "Is this true?" with piercing eyes. "Have you been causing trouble?" "No," was my stern reply, but my voice trailed off with emotion. "I haven't done anything wrong." Instead of believing me, though, he seemed even more upset. That was the exact moment I felt completely alone, standing between the man I loved and his mother, who appeared determined to ruin all we had worked so hard to build. What should have been a day of happiness and love had instead become a scene of treachery and heartache. Logan's chilly stare interrupted my attempt to enjoy my wedding. He said, "You've made a fool of yourself and my mother," loud enough for the visitors in the vicinity to hear. "This is unacceptable." Even though his remarks were a shock to me, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Logan reached out and gave me a startling slap across the cheek. The room reverberated with the sound of the smack, and I felt embarrassed. The shame of being struck in front of everyone caused my face to sting in addition to the physical pain. There was utter silence in the room. Unsure of what to do, guests exchanged nervous looks. Nobody offered to assist. As if she had just prevailed in a fight, Logan's mother watched with a smug expression on her face. Then the silence was broken by Logan's angry voice. He yelled, "You're a disgrace. My mother has been dishonored by you. It's unbelievable to me that I married someone like you." His remarks left me speechless and stuck in place. My eyes filled with tears, but I was immobile. The faces of the guests surrounding me blurred in shock. My feet felt like they were glued to the ground, preventing me from running and escaping this terrible spectacle. Logan's actions were heartbreaking, not simply upsetting. My dignity was torn away on what should have been the best time of my life, in front of everyone I knew. I could feel the weight of the visitors' judgment as they slowly started to grumble and awkwardly resume their talks. The reception's music and laughing appeared to mock my suffering. I had reached a breaking point. I left the reception and went to a private area in the rear of the building, away from curious onlookers. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I had dreamed of this day as a fairy tale, a celebration of Logan's actions and his mother's clear satisfaction in my humiliation weren't just a moment of anger. They were signs of a deeper, darker reality that I hadn't fully seen before. As I wiped my tears and looked at my reflection in the dim light, a quiet determination began to grow within me. I couldn't let this moment define me. I couldn't let their cruelty break me. I made a silent promise to myself. I would not stay silent, and I would not remain a victim. No matter how hard it might be, I would fight for my dignity and for the truth. The wedding, once a symbol of a new beginning, had become something else entirely. It was now a turning point in my life. The pain and betrayal I felt were overwhelming, but they sparked something powerful within me, a fire that would drive me to reclaim my life and my future. I knew the journey to take back control of my life and seek justice would be long and difficult, but I was determined to face it head-on. This was only the beginning of my fight, and I refused to let Logan and Mrs. Owen's actions define me. In the weeks after the disastrous wedding, I felt like I was living in a haze. The pain of Logan humiliating me in front of everyone was still fresh, but what hurt even more was realizing that my marriage had been a lie. Despite everything, I knew I couldn't let their cruelty dictate my future. I needed to take charge of my life and find a way to fight back. My first step was to gather proof. I understood that exposing Logan and his mother would require more than just my word. I needed solid evidence of the emotional and financial abuse I had suffered. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator named K.I. Bernier. He was known for being discreet and effective. After reaching out to him, we had a brief meeting, and he agreed to take my case. Maxim Bernier was a calm and thoughtful man in his mid-50s with sharp instincts. He listened carefully as I shared the events of my wedding and described the ongoing abuse. "This must be very hard for you," he said gently. "But if you're willing to work with me, we can uncover the truth." I nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "I'll do whatever it takes," I replied. "I just want the truth to come out." With his help, I began recording my conversations with Logan and Mrs. Owen. It wasn't easy. Carrying a small recorder in my purse felt strange and stressful, but I knew it was necessary. I needed undeniable proof of how manipulative and cruel they were. It didn't take long to capture the evidence. One evening, Logan and I had a heated argument during dinner. As I recorded the conversation, I felt a mix of dread and determination. Logan's voice was full of anger. "You're so useless," he spat. "Why can't you ever do anything right?" Trying to stay calm, I replied, "I'm doing my best." "Why are you always so critical?" His response was cold and cruel. "Your best isn't good enough. You're a burden on me and my mother, and everyone knows it." Listening to his words later made me realize how deeply their abuse ran. It wasn't just about what happened at the wedding. It was a long-standing pattern of emotional cruelty. With each recording, I pieced together a clearer picture of their behavior, strengthening my resolve to expose them. Meanwhile, Maxim Bernier was investigating their financial dealings. He conducted background checks and looked into their accounts, searching for any signs of wrongdoing. After several weeks, he came back with some troubling discoveries. "I found some suspicious transactions," Maxim Bernier said, his face serious. "It looks like Logan and Mrs. Owen might be involved in financial fraud." My heart started pounding as he laid out the details. There are large sums of money being moved between various accounts. It seems they might be embezzling funds from clients. I was stunned. The revelation was shocking, but it also made sense. Logan was a financial advisor, and Mrs. Owen had always been heavily involved in his business. Their abusive behavior wasn't just personal, it was part of something darker. They weren't just controlling and cruel, they were criminals. However, I knew that these financial records alone wouldn't be enough to expose them. The recordings of their emotional abuse were important, but I needed to connect all the pieces together. That's when Elizabeth, my best friend, stepped in to help. Elizabeth was in her early 40s with a sharp mind and a heart full of loyalty. Throughout this difficult time, she had been my constant source of strength, always there with words of encouragement and support. When I shared the evidence with her, her reaction was a mix of shock and determination. "We have to act on this," she said firmly, flipping through the recordings and financial documents. "This isn't just about you anymore. They're committing serious crimes together." Elizabeth and I got to work. We reviewed all the evidence, listening to hours of recordings and highlighting instances of emotional abuse. We then cross-referenced the recordings with the financial documents Maxim Bernier had found. It was exhausting, but it also gave me a sense of power. With every piece of evidence we uncovered, I felt stronger and more determined to see this through. One evening, as we sat surrounded by papers and notes, Elizabeth looked up at me. "Kendra, you've come so far already," she said, her voice full of encouragement. "You've gathered so much evidence. Now it's time to take the next step." I nodded, feeling both nervous and resolute. "I'm ready," I said. "They need to be held accountable for everything they've done." We came up with a bold plan. I decided to organize a public event where I would expose Logan and Mrs. Owen. It was important to me that their deceit and cruelty were revealed in front of an audience, so they couldn't hide from the truth. The idea was terrifying but empowering. This would be the final step in reclaiming my life and bringing justice to light. As we prepared for the event, the weight of what I was about to do pressed on me. The fear was real, but so was my determination. With Maxim Bernier's evidence, Elizabeth's unwavering support, and my own resolve, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. This was my chance to stand up, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been hurt or silenced. It was time to take my life back. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey had been long and difficult, but I knew it was leading me to a turning point. This was my chance to stand up for myself and expose the truth. No matter how hard it would be, I was determined to take control of my life and fight for justice. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The air was thick with tension, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. I had planned everything carefully, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. The venue was a grand hall, elegantly decorated to create a sense of sophistication. It stood in stark contrast to the truth I was about to reveal. I had invited family, friends, and members of the media. I wanted as many people as possible to see and hear what I had uncovered. As the guests began to fill the hall, I could feel the buzz of excitement and curiosity in the air. My stomach fluttered with nerves, but I reminded myself of why I was doing this. Logan and Mrs. Owen were among the attendees. They stood confidently by my side, their smiles bright and carefree. They had no idea what was about to happen. The event began with speeches and toasts, creating a festive and cheerful atmosphere. I played my role as the gracious hostess, smiling and chatting with the guests. But inside, I felt like an actor in a drama that was about to reach its climax. I took deep breaths to steady myself as the moment of truth approached. When it was time for my announcement, I walked to the podium. The room fell silent, and every eye turned to me. Logan and Mrs. Owen exchanged curious glances, their smiles still in place, but tinged with unease. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice steady but full of emotion. This event was meant to celebrate a new beginning, but today it has become something much more important. The guests looked intrigued, leaning forward in their seats. I continued, "What I'm about to share has been hidden for too long. It's the truth behind the image that Logan and his mother have worked so hard to maintain." I noticed Logan's smile fade, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Mrs. Owen's expression remained calm, but there was tension in her posture. I took a deep breath, picked up a remote, and pressed a button. The screen behind me came to life, showing audio recordings and financial documents. The first recording began to play, a conversation between Logan and me during one of our arguments. His angry voice filled the room, his harsh words cutting like a knife. The crowd sat in stunned silence as the recording continued, exposing the emotional abuse I had endured. This was just the beginning of the truth I was about to reveal. I saw a mix of shock and sympathy on the faces of the guests as they listened to the recordings. They heard Logan calling me names and belittling me, his harsh words cutting deep. The screen then switched to the financial documents that Maxim Bernier had uncovered. These documents showed large sums of money being moved between accounts, clearly pointing to the fraudulent activities Logan and Mrs. Owen were involved in. The numbers on the screen were staggering, and the evidence was undeniable. As the recordings and documents continued to play, I saw Logan's demeanor change. His face turned pale, and his eyes darted nervously around the room, clearly realizing how serious the situation was. Mrs. Owen, on the other hand, looked furious and embarrassed. Her face was flushed, and she glanced around the room, seemingly searching for a way out. As the truth unraveled before everyone, I felt a surge of strength and determination. I addressed the crowd, my voice steady and clear. These recordings and documents are evidence of the abuse and fraud that Logan and his mother have committed. They have not only manipulated and controlled me, but also taken advantage of others. It's time for the truth to come to light. The media representatives in the room were busy scribbling notes and taking pictures, capturing every moment. The atmosphere in the hall shifted dramatically. What had started as a celebration had now become a moment of revelation and outrage. Guests began murmuring to one another, their shock and disbelief evident. Logan finally broke his silence. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and desperation as he shouted, "This is ridiculous. These are just lies and distortions. You're trying to ruin us." But his protests were weak compared to the overwhelming evidence displayed before the crowd. The guests, now fully aware of the situation, began reacting. Some expressed their outrage, their voices rising in disapproval. Others offered me words of support and sympathy, showing me that they stood by my side. The hall buzzed with conversation and emotion. I felt a sense of validation and empowerment as I watched the truth sink in for everyone. Logan and Mrs. Owen, who had once stood so confidently, were now scrambling to maintain their composure. Their carefully crafted image of respectability was completely shattered. As the event drew to a close, Logan and Mrs. Owen attempted to leave quietly, but they couldn't escape the crowd. The media cameras followed their every move, and questions were thrown at them from all directions. Their once confident facades had crumbled, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. For me, it was a moment of triumph. This event had not only exposed their lies and cruelty, but also marked a significant step toward reclaiming my life. The truth was finally out, and I felt a sense of freedom and hope for the future. It was a victory not just in exposing them, but in taking back my own power. I had taken control of my story and fought back against the injustice I had endured. As I looked at the stunned faces around me and the flurry of activity in the room, I felt a mix of relief and determination. The truth was finally out, but I knew my journey was far from over. In the days after the event, everything felt like a whirlwind. The truth about Logan and Mrs. Owen spread quickly, and the fallout was enormous. Media coverage was relentless, and the public reacted with both outrage at their actions and support for me. People began to see me as a symbol of resilience and justice, but I understood that my real fight had just begun. As weeks passed, the media continued to dig into Logan and Mrs. Owen's lives. Their fraudulent activities were scrutinized, and investigations began to unravel the full extent of their financial crimes. The once confident duo now faced legal battles that could strip them of their wealth and reputations. While the spotlight remained on them, I had my own work to do. I needed to make sure justice was served. With the help of my lawyer, who had been by my side through everything, we prepared a strong case. We carefully organized all the evidence we had collected, the recordings, financial documents, and testimonies, into a solid legal argument. When the trial began, I was nervous but determined. The courtroom was an intimidating place, but I faced it with courage. Taking the stand to testify about the abuse and fraud was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Reliving those painful moments was emotionally draining, but I reminded myself that I was doing this for my future, for my freedom. Logan and Mrs. Owen tried to defend themselves, but their arguments were weak. They attempted to discredit me and dismiss the recordings, but it didn't work. The financial documents clearly showed the extent of their wrongdoing, and the recordings highlighted their emotional cruelty. Their credibility fell apart as the truth was laid bare. The trial reached its peak when the judge announced the verdict. Logan was found guilty of financial fraud and ordered to repay the victims he had stolen from. Mrs. Owen also faced legal consequences, including fines and a damaged reputation. The judge acknowledged the emotional abuse I had suffered and granted me a divorce. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served. The pain and humiliation I had endured were now part of the past. While there was still healing to do, I knew this was a new beginning. I had taken back my life, defended myself, and demonstrated that I could not be silenced. Although my path had been challenging, it had strengthened me, and I felt free for the first time in a long time. I was relieved by the court victory, but it was bittersweet. It was satisfying to see justice done, but the process had worn me out. Despite my fatigue, I felt thankful. I had finally prevailed after a protracted and difficult battle. I was proud of what I had accomplished and felt a sense of closure, even if the emotional scars would take time to heal. I made the decision to begin a new chapter in my life after the court struggle was over. I left the chaos and unpleasant memories of my previous life behind and went to a peaceful house outside of Seattle, Washington. The tranquil settings provided me with a much-needed fresh start. I reflected on everything I had gone through as I sat on my porch and watched the sun set over the undulating hills. Although there had been many hardships and difficulties along the way, it had also been a route to empowerment. I had taken back my life and done the right thing. Maxim Bernier's assistance and that of my best friend Elizabeth had been crucial. When I wanted to give up, their unfailing faith in me kept me going. The transformation from victim to victor had changed me. I had overcome some of the most difficult times in my life. I had taken charge of my tale, and the truth about the crimes and abuse committed by Logan and Mrs. Owen had come to light. Their behaviors no longer made me feel like a victim. Rather, I felt as though I had retaliated and prevailed. I had not felt content and at peace in years as I sat in the quiet of my new house. I had moved past the past and was looking forward to a bright future. My narrative had evolved into one of fortitude, fairness, and optimism. It demonstrated to me and others that we can muster the courage to resist even in the most trying circumstances. I considered how far I had progressed. I had taken back my life, confronted my fears, and revealed the truth. Although the path wasn't straightforward, it had brought me to this state of contentment and tranquility. Though they had molded me, the traumatic events no longer defined who I was. Rather, they served as a reminder of my fortitude and will. Now that the past was firmly in the past, I looked forward to the future with purpose and hope. This new chapter offered a chance to start again and construct a happy, meaningful life. I had shown myself that it is possible to shine even in the most difficult circumstances. I was overcome with thankfulness as I gazed over the serene hills. I had recovered my life, discovered my power, and battled for justice. I was now prepared to put the suffering of the past behind me and live life to the fullest. My name is Tiffany. 10 years ago, I was a hopeful tour guide who wanted to see the world. Everything changed when I met Jack. Jack was nice, did well in life, and made me feel really happy. We got married fast, and I believed I had everything. Then the job offer arrived that would change everything. Tiff, I got a job offer from a great law firm. Jack said one night at dinner, "That's wonderful, dear. Where is it?" "It's in a different city. We need to move." I felt really sad. I liked my job, but I liked Jack even more. What is going to happen with my job? Jack's face became serious. "Let's go, Tiff. This is a special chance that may not come again. You can look for jobs anywhere." I was unsure, but his excitement made me feel good. "You're correct. We will find a way to make it happen." We went to a large house in a different city. At first it was fun, but as we opened the boxes, I saw a different side of Jack that I had never seen before. "The house is a mess," he said one day, looking around our living room that still had boxes everywhere. "I'm doing it," I said, pointing to the boxes. "Do your work quicker. I can't keep living like this." I was surprised, but I let it go. He was feeling stressed because of the new job, I thought. Weeks went by, and I had a hard time finding a job. "I think I might look for a job as a tour guide here," I said one evening. Jack chuckled. "That's not true. Pay attention to the house. It's still not good enough." "But I want to have a job, Jack. I really miss it." He got up, looking much taller than me. "I'm the one doing the work, Tiffany. Your job is to make sure everything is just right for me. Do you understand?" I nodded, trying not to cry. This was not the man I married, but I was set on making it work. I had no idea that this was only the start of a long nightmare. As the days became weeks and the weeks became months, I felt stuck in a cycle of constant chores and being very careful. Jack's requests became harder to meet, and he got angrier more quickly. One day I said we should get a housekeeper to help with the work. Jack's face became red. "Are you serious? Are you trying to spend my money on something that you should handle yourself? This is your work, Tiffany. If you can't deal with it, maybe you're not meant to be my wife." His words hurt, but I kept my pride down. "You're correct. I apologize. I will work harder." I really put in more effort. I focused on being the best housewife, thinking it would help me win back the man I loved. But the more I did, the more Jack thought I should do. As his career grew, our relationship fell apart. I watched as he became a famous lawyer, while I slowly disappeared into the background, like a ghost in my own home. Over the years, I got really good at managing social media, taking care of Jack's accounts from behind the scenes. It was funny. I made it look like we were a happy, successful couple, but I was not being honest. One evening, while I was getting dinner ready, Jack came in really fast and slammed the door. "Tough day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Be quiet and make my food," he said sharply. I put the meal I had worked on for hours onto the plate. Jack took a bite and then spit it out. "This is really gross. Why can't you do things correctly?" Before I could say anything, he knocked the plate off the table. It broke on the floor, food flying all over the place. "Clean it up," he said, standing above me. I knelt down to pick up the broken pieces. Tears hurt my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. This was now our usual way of life. The next day I really wanted to improve, so I spent a lot of time making Jack's favorite dish. While I was setting the table, I suddenly remembered that I had forgotten the bread. Jack came in, taking off his tie. "Where is my food?" "Coming right up," I said, quickly getting the soup ready. He sat down, looked at the table, and got really mad. "Where is the bread? Are you really this bad at your job?" He quickly knocked the bowl off the table. Hot soup spilled on my leg, and I let out a scream of pain. "You're so dumb," Jack said quietly, walking away and leaving me with the mess and my sore skin. While I was cleaning and crying softly, a thought suddenly struck me. How did I let it become this messy? When did I turn into just a shell of a person? The next morning, I woke up feeling determined like I hadn't in a long time. I can't keep living like this. Jack, I said as he was getting ready to go to work, I can't keep doing this. I want to end my marriage. He turned slowly, a mean smile growing on his face. Is there a divorce? He laughed, and it made me feel uneasy. Pay attention, Tiffany. If you go away, I will hurt you. You will have nothing. No money, no respect, nothing at all. You might find yourself on the streets with others who feel lost. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I saw the homeless people in our city, their sad faces stuck in my mind. Is that really what will happen to me? Accept it, Jack went on. You need me to be complete. Keep that in mind. When he left and slammed the door, I sat down on the floor. He was correct. I didn't have any money, no job, nothing at all. I realized I couldn't continue living this way. That day was a big change. I may not be brave enough to leave right now, but I have begun to make plans. I started to record our talks without telling you, keeping the mean messages, and writing down everything that happened. If I wanted to get away, I had to have proof. While I kept recording Jack's abuse, his career grew even more successful. He won an important case and chose to celebrate at home with his coworkers and friends. You'll get everything ready, he said, and don't even think about getting takeout. I want everything to be made at home. I worked hard for many days. I cleaned all parts of our house, cooked a variety of dishes, and made sure everything was just right. The night of the party came, and I was tired but prepared. Jack got home early, holding a bottle of wine. Here, he said as he poured me a glass, you seem like you could use this. I was surprised by what he did, but I accepted it with thanks. The wine tasted strange, but I thought it was just because I was tired. Jack hardly drank from his glass. Please change, he said. Visitors will arrive shortly. I went upstairs and felt dizzy all of a sudden. When I got to our bedroom, the room was spinning around. I fell onto the bed, feeling very tired and losing awareness quickly. When I woke up, the sun was shining through the windows. I felt confused and sleepy as I walked down the stairs. Jack's mom, Margaret, was in the kitchen. Her face twisted in a way that showed she was really grossed out when she saw me. Oh, look who finally showed up, she said with a smirk. You should feel bad about what you did. What? What's going on? I asked, my head hurting. What occurred? You got drunk and made my son look bad in front of his friends. That is what happened. Margaret's voice got louder with every word. He called me to help keep things fun because his wife was passed out drunk upstairs. I felt sick. No, that's not possible. I only had one glass of wine. Oh, save it. Margaret cut me off. I always knew you weren't good enough for my Jack. Now everyone knows what a mess you are. As Margaret continued her tirade, fragments of memory surfaced. The strange taste of the wine. Jack barely drinking his. The sudden onset of dizziness. He drugged me, I whispered to myself, the realization hitting me like a truck. After Margaret left, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind racing. Jack was systematically destroying my reputation. If I tried to leave now, who would believe me? That day, I stepped up my efforts. I bought a new phone and hid it carefully. I started recording everything. Jack's drunken rants, his 3:00 a.m. cleaning demands, every insult and threat. One incident I recorded stood out painfully in my memory. It was my birthday, and I had hoped Jack might remember, might show a glimmer of the man I once loved. I prepared a special dinner, holding on to a foolish hope for a peaceful evening. Jack stumbled in late, reeking of alcohol. I hit record on my hidden phone as he entered the kitchen. "What's all this?" he slurred, looking at the carefully set table. "It's my birthday, Jack. I made dinner," I said softly. He laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "Your birthday? Who cares? Look at you, you fat cow. You don't deserve a celebration." I felt each word like a physical blow, but kept the camera rolling as he continued his tirade. "And this," he gestured at the food, "this is slop. You call yourself a wife and can't even cook a decent meal." He swept the plates off the table, food splattering across the floor, the very food I had scrubbed meticulously earlier. I flinched but didn't move, letting the camera capture every moment of his drunken cruelty. Another night, the recording caught an even more bizarre incident. It was 3:00 a.m. when Jack shook me awake roughly. "Get up," he hissed, pulling me out of bed. "What's wrong?" I asked, disoriented and frightened. "I found dust. The house is filthy. Clean it, all of it, now." For hours I scrubbed every surface of our home. Jack followed behind, inspecting my work with a critical eye. All the while, my phone recorded from its hidden spot, capturing his relentless demands and my exhausted compliance. These recordings became my secret weapons, concrete evidence of the abuse I endured. Each file was carefully saved and backed up, a digital archive of my suffering and, ultimately, my path to freedom. Meanwhile, I heard the whispers when we were out, saw the looks of contempt from Jack's friends. But I kept smiling, playing the role of the perfect wife while secretly fighting for my freedom. Our wedding anniversary was approaching. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped things might improve. But I should have known better. The night of our anniversary, Jack came home in high spirits. "I booked us a table at the best restaurant in town," he announced. "Let's celebrate." I was wary but agreed. Before we left, Jack handed me a glass of lemonade. "I made it myself," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Alarm bells rang in my head. I pretended to drink, but when Jack stepped out to make a call, I quickly poured it into a nearby plant. As we drove to the restaurant, I felt myself getting drowsy. I fought to stay awake, but my eyes were so heavy. The next thing I knew, I was being roughly pulled from the car. Through half-closed eyes, I saw Jack sneering down at me. "This is where you belong," he spat, throwing my purse far into the darkness with the other worthless people. I heard the car door slam, tires screeching as Jack sped away. My heart raced as I took in my surroundings. Trash littered the streets, and shadowy figures lurked in the darkness. The sound of distant gunshots made me flinch. I was alone, dressed up and wearing jewelry in the most dangerous part of town. Jack's plan was clear. He hoped I'd fall victim to the criminals who called this area home. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to think. I spotted a small convenience store, its flickering neon sign a beacon of hope in this desolate place. I ran towards it, my heels clacking on the cracked pavement. Bursting through the door, I startled the woman behind the counter. "Please," I gasped. "I need help. Can I use your phone?" The woman, her name tag reading Rosa, looked at me with a mix of concern and suspicion. "What happened to you, honey?" she asked. In a rush, I explained my situation. Rosa's eyes widened, and without a word, she locked the store's front door. "Can't have any troublemakers coming in," she explained, handing me her cell phone. "Make your call. Sweetie, you're safe here." With shaking hands, I dialed my friend Sarah's number, silently thanking my good memory. Sarah answered on the third ring. "Sarah, it's Tiffany." "I need help," I said, my voice breaking. "Tiff, what's wrong? Where are you?" I gave her the store's address, and she gasped. "That's the worst neighborhood in the city. What are you doing there?" "Jack, he left me here. Please, can you come get me?" "I'm on my way. Don't move." As I waited, Rosa kept me company. Her kindness was a stark contrast to the cruelty I'd become accustomed to. "Thank you," I said, as Sarah's car pulled up outside. "You may have saved my life tonight," I added. I slipped off the expensive ring Jack had given me years ago. "Here, please take this. It's not much, but—" Rosa shook her head. "Keep it. Honey, use it to start your new life." Tears in my eyes, I hugged her before rushing out to Sarah's car. As we drove away, Sarah turned to me. "Tiff, this has to stop. You need to fight back." "How?" I asked, feeling defeated. "He has all the power, all the connections." "Not all of them," Sarah said firmly. "I have a friend who works in television. It's time to tell your story." The next few days were a whirlwind. Sarah's friend, a producer named Lisa, arranged for me to appear on a popular talk show. The lights were blinding as I walked onto the set. The host, a kind-faced woman named Angela, greeted me warmly. "Tiffany, thank you for being here," she said. "Can you tell us your story?" Taking a deep breath, I began to speak. I told them everything: the years of emotional abuse, the manipulation, the incident in the bad neighborhood. As I spoke, I saw the shock and sympathy on the audience's faces. "Why are you coming forward now?" Angela asked. "Because I can't be silent anymore," I replied, my voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "There are so many women out there suffering in silence, thinking they're alone. I want them to know they're not." As the show ended, my phone exploded with notifications. My story had struck a chord, and people were rallying behind me. But amidst the supportive messages, one text made my blood run cold. It was from Jack. "You'll regret this, you lying scum. I'll destroy you." I showed the message to Sarah, my hands shaking. "Don't worry," she said, a determined glint in her eye. "He just made his biggest mistake. We've got him now." As we left the studio, I realized this was just the beginning. The real battle was about to start, and for the first time in years, I felt ready to fight. The days following my TV appearance were a blur of activity. My phone rang constantly with calls from journalists, lawyers, and women's rights advocates. Jack's threats continued, but each one only strengthened my resolve. One morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Tiffany?" A woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Amanda Reeves. I'm a lawyer and I'd like to help you with your case." I hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, but I can't afford a lawyer." "You misunderstand," Amanda said. "My firm wants to take your case pro bono. We've been looking for a way to take down Jack Peterson for years. Your story could be the key." It turned out that Jack had made many enemies over the years. Amanda's firm represented several clients who had lost cases to him, some under suspicious circumstances. They saw my case as an opportunity to not only help me, but to expose Jack's unethical practices. I met with Amanda and her team the next day. As I shared my evidence, the recordings, the text messages, everything, their eyes widened. "This is gold," Amanda said, reviewing the files. "With this, we can not only win your divorce case, but potentially get Jack disbarred." The divorce proceedings began, and Jack came out swinging. He painted a picture of me as an alcoholic and unfaithful wife who was trying to ruin his reputation out of spite. "Your Honor," Jack's lawyer argued, "Mrs. Peterson has a history of erratic behavior and substance abuse. These allegations are nothing more than the desperate actions of a woman trying to extort money from her hard-working husband." I watched as Jack's mother, Margaret, took the stand, tearfully recounting instances of my supposed drunken behavior, including the night of Jack's work party. "She was a disgrace," Margaret sobbed. "My poor son has suffered so much because of her." I felt sick listening to their lies, but Amanda squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Don't worry," she whispered. We're just getting started." When it was our turn to present evidence, Amanda was ruthless. She played the recordings of Jack's abuse, showed the threatening text messages, and presented a timeline of his escalating behavior. "And now," Amanda said, "I'd like to call Sarah Thompson to the stand." Sarah recounted the night she picked me up from the dangerous neighborhood. Her testimony corroborated my story. "Objection," Jack's lawyer shouted. "This is hearsay." "Overruled," the judge said. "Continue, Miss Thompson." Next, Amanda called Rosa, the convenience store clerk, to testify. Rosa described my state when I entered her store that night and how she had to lock the door for my safety. Jack's face grew redder with each testimony. I could see him seething, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. The final blow came when Amanda presented a toxicology report. "Your Honor," Amanda said, "we had Mrs. Peterson's hair tested for long-term drug exposure. The results showed traces of sedatives consistent with her account of being drugged by Mr. Peterson." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Jack leaped to his feet, shouting, "She's lying. You can't believe this." "Mr. Peterson, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt," the judge warned. As the evidence mounted, I saw the change in people's faces. The doubt was replaced by shock and sympathy. Even some of Jack's friends in the gallery looked disgusted. The judge called a recess to review all the evidence. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Jack's eye. For the first time, I saw fear there. The courtroom was packed as we reconvened for the judge's decision. The tension was palpable, and I could feel Jack's glare burning into the back of my head. Judge Harris cleared his throat. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this court finds in favor of Mrs. Tiffany Peterson. A collective gasp filled the room. I sat there stunned as the judge continued. "Mr. Jack Peterson is hereby ordered to pay alimony, surrender 50% of all joint property, and provide financial compensation for emotional damages. Furthermore, Mr. Peterson will cover all legal costs associated with this case." Jack exploded. "This is outrageous. I'll appeal. You can't do this to me." "Mr. Peterson," the judge's voice boomed, "I suggest you control yourself. Given the evidence presented, you should consider yourself lucky that criminal charges haven't been filed." As Jack was forcibly calmed by his lawyer, the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Peterson, this court is imposing a restraining order against Mr. Peterson. He is not to approach you or contact you through any means. Do you understand?" I nodded, tears of relief streaming down my face. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I moved out of the house I had once considered a prison into a small but cozy apartment. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But Jack wasn't done. Despite the restraining order, he found ways to make his presence felt. Mutual acquaintances would relay his threats, and I'd occasionally spot his car driving by my new place. "We need to do something," Sarah said one evening as we were having coffee. "He's not going to stop." I nodded, an idea forming. "You're right, and I think I know how to end this once and for all." I still had access to Jack's social media accounts. He'd been too arrogant to change the passwords, probably assuming I wouldn't dare touch them. It was time to use that against him. Over the next few days, I meticulously documented our entire divorce process on his accounts. I shared court transcripts, audio clips, and my own story. The response was overwhelming. Jack's carefully crafted public image crumbled overnight. His firm, unwilling to be associated with the scandal, asked for his resignation. Clients dropped him in droves. When Jack realized what was happening, he went ballistic. He showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. "You scum!" he screamed. "I'll kill you for this." I called the police and they arrived quickly. Jack was arrested for violating the restraining order. His threats caught on my phone's voice recorder. As they led him away, I saw the man I had once loved, now a shell of himself, broken by his own cruelty and arrogance. In the following months, I heard through the grapevine that Jack had moved to another state, trying to rebuild his career, but his reputation followed him, and he struggled to find work. As for me, I was rebuilding too, but in a much different way. The publicity from the case led to an opportunity I never expected. A local charity that helped women escape abusive relationships reached out to me. "We'd like you to come work with us," the director said. "Your experience could help so many women." I accepted without hesitation. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose. I was using my pain to help others, and in doing so, I was healing myself. 1 year after the trial, I stood in front of a room full of women, all survivors like me. As I shared my story, I saw hope rekindling in their eyes. "Remember," I told them, "you are stronger than you know. Your story matters, and you are not alone." As I looked out at their faces, I realized that this moment, this purpose, was what I had been fighting for all along, not just my freedom, but the chance to help others find theirs. As months passed, my work at the charity became more than just a job. It became my calling. I found myself connecting with women from all walks of life, each with their own harrowing stories of abuse and survival. One day, a young woman named Emily arrived at our center. Her story was very similar: a husband who controlled her, being cut off from friends and family, and a strong fear of leaving. In the next few weeks, I worked with Emily to help her make a safety plan and boost her confidence. When she finally left her husband, the relief on her face was something I recognized well. "Thank you," she said softly, giving me a big hug. "You helped me a lot." Her words really affected me. While I was helping her, I found out that I was also getting better myself. As our center became more well-known, we began getting invites to talk at conferences and events. At first, the idea scared me a lot. I was never good at public speaking, and just thinking about telling my story to big groups made my hands sweaty. But Sarah, always there for me, cheered me on. "Tiff, your story can help a lot of people. You need to do this." I spoke for the first time at a nearby university. As I stood at the podium and looked at all the faces, I felt a strong feeling inside me that I didn't know I had. "I am Tiffany," I said, "and this is my story of how I survived." While I talked, I noticed how my words were affecting others. Students leaned forward in their seats. Some wiped away tears, while others nodded in understanding or clenched their fists in anger at what I had gone through. After the talk, many people lined up to talk to me. Lots of people talked about their own stories or those of their family and friends. Some people just wanted to help. That night, as I lay in bed thinking about the day, I felt a strong sense of purpose. My past, though it hurt, has turned into a way to make things better. I kept doing speaking events, traveling all over the country. I talked at colleges, women's shelters, and a TEDx event. Every time I got strength from the audience, knowing that my words could be the help someone needed. I began writing a book about my experiences during this time. It was a tough process, making me go through some of my hardest times again, but it was also helpful, letting me deal with my trauma in a different way. The day my book came out felt really strange and amazing. Seeing my name on the cover, my story out there for everyone to read, made me feel both scared and proud. I was surprised that the book connected with people. It went up the bestseller lists, and I quickly started doing interviews on national TV. In one interview, the host asked me a question that made me stop and think. "Tiffany, after all you've experienced, do you regret anything?" I took a moment to think before I answered. "I feel sorry for the years I wasted because of fear and abuse, but I am thankful for my journey. Every step and every struggle brought me to this point, where I can help others discover their strength. No, I wouldn't change anything." While I kept working, I saw that my story was not finished yet. Every day had new challenges, new chances to grow, and to help people. The frightened, quiet woman I used to be has turned into a voice for those who cannot speak, a light of hope for those still stuck in the darkness I had left behind.